Mr. and Mrs. Kincaid have asked that I say a word of comfort to you if I could. If there is any word of comfort I can give you, it's just this, that the face of the beast always becomes known, and the time of the beast always passes.
That the only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
No. Be afraid. Be very afraid.
There is nothing to fear except God. Whatever that means to you.
Do I look like someone who cares what God thinks? Why do I say this? Because we got Holy Ghost power!
You're listening to a podcast exploring faith and fear, what scares us and what saves us. This is The Fear of God.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Fear of God podcast. My favorite podcast. I can only imagine it's your favorite podcast. Here at the Fear of God, we find the holy and the horrific at the intersection of faith and fear, dissecting what scares us in order to find what saves us. I am one of your hosts, Nathan Rouse. This is a very exciting week. We are diving back into our umbrella series for the year. Typically with me is fellow co-host Reed Lackey. He was here a minute ago, but he said something about needing to go hunt up some private justice. You know, typically with me is fellow co-host Reed Lackey, but you know, he was here a minute ago, and then he excused himself as he was worried he was going to make lemonade in his pants. Oh. You know, typically with me is fellow co-host Reed Lackey. And Reed is a bit of a bookworm. He was here a minute ago, but he was like, Nathan, just hang on. I got to finish this new book release, that of the Hardy Boys and the Reverend Werewolf. I was a fan of the Hardy Boys in the, 80s. I did not know they were publishing new editions of Hardy Boy books, but that's pretty exciting. He'll have to let us know how that book ended. You know, typically with me is fellow co-host Reed Lackey, and y'all, I just gotta forewarn you, okay? He wants to record tonight because this is a very special movie to him. But he's so excited for this conversation about this particular movie that he said he feels like a virgin on prom night. While we wait for Reed to recover from whatever various and sundry activities he has chosen to engage in. While we wait for him to return, I did just want to encourage you, entreat you, implore you. I'm not above begging, if it comes to that, to go and leave us a review. Go and leave us a rating. You've been listening to us for a while. You've been trying to figure out this whole fear of God thing. What are these weirdos talking about horror movies and Jesus? Even when they talk about Jesus, not quite like how other people talk about Jesus. Go talk about it. Go tell people about it in the form of a 5-star rating or a glowing review. We would very much appreciate that. Reed, you have returned from hunting up justice, making lemonade, reading Hardy Boys, and a little too much excitement, my friend. How are you?
Nathan, you're a booger. I just want to let you know you're a booger. That's all I got to say. You're a booger.
That is very much the insult born of a 70-year-old man in a 30-year-old man's body.
You booger!
Oh, get the booger! You're just an old rascally booger. Woo!
Oh,
hey, buddy.
Well, hey, buddy.
Welcome back from your misadventures.
Yes.
I'm glad to have you.
So, it is, it's not too deep of a cut for Stephen King fans for you to have mentioned, like the whole lemonade thing. That's one of my...
What? I'm making a Beyonce reference.
Sure, I know. I know. Oh, that album is fire. So, but no, I was one of my favorite Stephen King short stories, The Man in the Black Suit. The one where the guy, but that's how he taunts him. Is he said he makes the little boy Billy basically relieve himself because he's so scared, and he's keeps saying, "I smell Billy's lemonade." That was his,
wow,
that was his, like recurring, like the devil's recurring taunt.
I smell Billy's.
Yep.
lemonade.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's a
King has. Oh man, we should have had the foresight to like hone in on a kingism for these episodes, but we didn't think about it, and so here we are. But we'll do it right now in a really organic, clunky fashion. King has these like interesting. Is aphorism the word I'm looking for? Just these things that are kind of unique to him. That just whether it's Billy's, I can smell Billy's lemonade or whatever it is you just said.
I mean, maybe.
Like well, it's like the Christ of King. Like he loves to say, "Make water," like so and so.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
As like they peed.
Sure. Well, and him having those things, I don't know if aphorism is the right word, but him having that the sort of repeated language is definitely true. I mean, stuff shows up all the time. We've commented before on the show about apotheosis. He loves that word. He tries to squeeze it into almost every major novel somewhere of something.
I mean, whenever apotheosis shows up in a King book, I make water.
Well, you know what happens after that? When life gives you apotheosis, you make lemonade.
Wow. So just to clarify here, an aphorism is a pithy observation that contains a general truth. Not exactly proper context, but not there's worse ways to use that word than what I just did.
There are way worse ways to use that. Like I made an aphorism is not the appropriate use.
No. Well, I mean, I don't know. I just threw the definition off my screen, so I'd have to compare it. I'd have to compare notes there.
If you don't stop this, I'll kick your aphorism.
Right.
Those are not appropriate.
I just aphoristically, kind of threw it out.
Aphorisms to aphorisms, like that. It just
wow. Yeah. Wow. All right, so Reed, we're back in goodness gracious.
Moving right along.
We are in 19, man.
Yes.
We are like
hashtag
what did
19.
We did The Mist last week. We did Pet Sematary 2 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
What did we do before that?
Before that was us. Just us.
Okay, well that wasn't King. That wasn't King.
That wasn't King.
So we're back into the King. We're in the swing.
Yeah,
of King.
well, no, we had done. Yeah, this year we've done. 1922. We did Gerald's Game. We did Pet Sematary. So yeah, we've had some fun stuff coming up. We are starting a little mini series here, a mini series within the larger series. So yeah, we did The Mist, and now here we are diving into. I'm very, very excited to talk about this movie and sort of slant by this little book, and that is the film is called Silver Bullet. The book it is based on, or the novella, if you will, is called Cycle of the Werewolf.
Whoa, Riri. Hey.
What
you watching? What you reading? What you listening to?
Man.
I appreciate you, my friend.
I appreciate you too.
I feel like I flew into this recording like Kramer on Seinfeld. I'm just like, I did not get a chance to glance at my notes. I had a lot going on today, and I literally walked in the door, made a ham sandwich, and pulled up Google Hangouts.
Exactly. Oh man, no worries at all. Well, can I share something with you real quick?
You can. I would love if you shared something with me.
So Nathan had posed out to our listeners on the Facebook group and the Facebook page to find out what you guys have been watching, reading, and or
Isn't that sweet of us?
Listening to. Yeah. To make our fans part of our show, I think that's pretty common practice, but it is still sweet. So but what we're gonna do is we are gonna pick one or two of those to share over the course of the next couple of weeks, and so you can find those posts on the Facebook group or the Facebook page and share your thoughts if you have not done so already. But can I share one with you?
You can.
Really
I'm looking forward to this.
Okay,
because I really don't want to hear what you're watching, reading, listening to. I just want to hear what our listeners are.
Wow. All right.
I know. That was a little too saucy. I'm sorry, buddy.
that was not lemonade. So, okay. So, Meredith Curran has said, I'm going to read her whole post because I think it's cool. She says, how do I keep this short? I'll do my best. She says, I just finished reading A Head Full of Ghosts by Paul Tremblay. The only reason I'm recommending this book is because it scared the crap out of me, and I don't want to sit with this alone. 15 years after the demise of her family, Mary Barrett agrees to work with an author who wants to unravel her perspective of what happened in the house she occupied with her family during her early years. Her sister, Marjorie, began to display strange and horrifying behavior. Their religious father believed it was demon possession. Their skeptical mother preferred to keep her head buried in the sand. After being laid off, desperate for income, the Barrett family agreed to allow a TV network to basically document the undoing of their family. Was it demon possession, mental illness, a cry for attention? And she says, I almost didn't finish this book. I'm still not quite sure how I feel about it. Marjorie's behavior was beyond unsettling. There were some things I really appreciated theme-wise, and there's a lot going on beyond the surface here, and I never found myself bored or wondering what else I could be reading. So the reason that I specifically honed in on Meredith's recommendation is because I've never read anything by Paul Tremblay yet, but he has hit my radar a lot. I get through like Goodreads and Amazon and stuff like that, his name and his books, not only A Head Full of Ghosts, but also I think his other book, The Cabin at the End of the World. There's a couple of his books that keep sort of popping up like, hey, Reed, you should check this out. It sounds like it would be up your alley for what you like. So I was very curious when she mentioned that, and the premise does sound tremendously intriguing. So formally, Meredith, thank you very much for that recommendation. I think I may finally dive into Paul Tremblay's work, and I'll start with A Head Full of Ghosts. And when I eventually get to that, I'll share my thoughts with all of you.
Awesome. Well, that's fun. Now, do you have a personal what you're watching?
No, why don't you share another one from the listener, and then we'll see.
I'll do that. You know what's really fun about this? So, listeners, I didn't know who Reed would pick to share, but I just want to shout out. I'm about to share someone too, and both Meredith and this person are Charlotte-based folks. So Reed, your side of the country needs to start representing, brother. Because
hit it up, guys. Come on.
Yeah. So and to be real specific, I'll probably pin this to the Facebook page or something. You know, we want to return to these, so don't think because yours isn't getting read this particular episode that it won't in the future. Regardless, absolutely. I want to shout out Jason Barnes. Jason and I go back a solid decade to a dozen years at this point. It's a little cray-cray. Our fellow nerds, and Jason, he went right to the heart. Reed, Jason.
What'd he say?
And this, I don't know, maybe we can dovetail this into our own little mini-sode about this. Jason decided to share with us that he had just watched The Avengers Endgame. So, listener, it should be said right now, go ahead and skip what you're watching, reading, listening to this episode if you want literally nothing sullied or spoiled for you about Avengers.
Yes.
We will talk about it after I share Jason's thoughts because it's time. I might cry.
Man.
So Jason, specifically of Endgame, said it cannot be summed up in a couple of sentences. I'm with you, JB. However, the experience I had was something I did not anticipate. I was amazed and surprised throughout the movie. I laughed, I cheered, and it's okay, Jay, you're amongst friends here. I teared up more times than I would like to admit, even during the mid-credits. I was not ready for the emotional weight of 20-plus movies being brought down on me in this glorious display of art. Not to mention the delivering of moments I've been wanting to see in action for a good part of my life. The Russos are the nerd kings of all time. Avengers, assemble. Reed! Reed, thank you, Jason. Thank you, Jason and Meredith, for sharing. Yes, thank you. Reed.
Oh my gosh.
Ray.
Oh my gosh. That's okay. So that's going to be
the Endgame now.
Yes. So yeah, that's what we should make for our watch and read and listening to. Because oh my gosh,
Are you sure we need to even talk about Silver Bullet?
You know what? I love Silver Bullet, but if
It's
we just
tempting.
talked for the next 2 hours about Endgame, I wouldn't cry about
And
that.
even if we talked for the next 2 hours about Endgame, we would still be an hour short of that movie's runtime, which is not something you and I can claim
Okay.
with a lot of the movies we cover.
It's true. I have a comment about that though. Everybody was like, "Oh my gosh, 3
I'm not
hours!"
complaining.
Oh no,
at
I
all.
know that. No, I know that. You weren't, but lots of people were like, "Oh man, watch your fluid intake. It's a 3-hour movie and everything." I'm like, "Hang on, guys. Everybody, stop for just a second. Simple math. Most films these days are between an hour and 45 minutes and 2 hours. Okay, most films.
I would actually say most films are, if we're going as low as 145, between 145 and 215 plus. But go
Yeah,
ahead.
okay. So, all right, so fine. So they're already there. Previews, straight up, if you make it in time for the previews are 20 minutes, sometimes 25, period. And you are already there at your, like, close to 3-hour mark. It's so amazing to me how people have been like, oh my gosh, it's 3 hours. And I'm like, that is really it's only 30 minutes longer than Infinity War. I mean, it is kind of, it is longer technically, but I'm like, there's not that much. And particularly the way Endgame's last hour is paced, that last hour feels like 5 minutes. I mean, it just zooms. The whole movie doesn't, but that last hour feels very, very tight and propulsive. And I think that was the thing for me. It felt very much, I don't know how much we want to get into this, and we do have Silver Bullet to talk about, but I mean, for
We
me,
really don't.
for me, Endgame kind of felt like 3 distinct films with different sort of tones. The first being sort of the more mournful aftermath of Infinity War. The middle one being the sort of
Time heist.
time heist, and then the last being there's no better way to say it. Avengers Assemble. I mean that is the last hour of that movie, and I felt like it was just so. I don't know. I think it was everything that it needed to be. I don't see how they could have done it better.
No. Well, yeah. I mean, I thought you were still on the runtime thing. No, I totally agree with you. Like, I mean, Reed, it makes me sad to reflect on this, that in our going on 20 years of friendship, the last decade plus, we've maybe seen 10 movies in the theater together, and none of them have been MCU movies.
Right.
Like I can't, it would be a disservice to you and to me and to the film to falsify this. I can't recreate my visceral experience watching that movie for the first time on the Thursday night of opening night. And you got to see it even ahead of me, but like what? I mean, I made a comment, texted a buddy today, just still reflecting on it, still bowled over. And I was like, you know what? I've read comics for 30 years almost. And you watch that movie and it's almost like, yeah, I'm done. I don't know how y'all can further distill these characters into their purest essences. You know what I mean? Like, they have so, and I mean, as far as the 3-hour thing goes, like, shut up. Who cares? Like, it's the culmination of 21 movies. Like, what?
Yeah.
Come on.
Oh yeah.
No,
absolutely.
even if it weren't a direct sort of sequel to Infinity War, like, it's still got to hit so many various notes. And I mean, goodness gracious, Reed, I wasn't medically, there was nothing, I wasn't concerned about myself medically, like I was going to suffer some sort of stroke or something or faint.
Sure.
But in terms of pure visceral physical response, just sighing and breathing heavy. And groaning and teary and outright weeping, and whatever the line is between like cheering and yelling, I crossed it multiple times.
Right.
And we haven't even talked about the content of the movie, which we don't, I guess, suppose really have to do. But oh my gosh,
yeah. No, it's a phenomenal achievement. I couldn't be. And you know what? Here's what I will say. We can revisit this and whatever. But maybe for the sake of anybody listening out there who has not seen it the past week, maybe we can bypass some of the specific content of the movie. But this is a phenomenal achievement on Marvel's part, and I don't think even by Marvel it will ever be recreated by anybody. But I think even Marvel.
We're recording on what day is it? Today's Monday.
Yeah.
That's how scattered my head is. It released on Thursday night. It has made $1.2 billion globally.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Not including today. And I mean, like, what in the world?
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
I don't want to like totally deviate from specific content beats because we did give a spoiler warning, so I don't feel too badly.
Sure.
But like, if you had to pick a favorite scene, and I know it's hard.
That is difficult. I think.
It doesn't have to be the favorite. It is a favorite.
Just a favorite? Okay.
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
All right. Well, then I will pick, because it's the one that I kept telling everybody to look out for. I didn't spoil it for them. I did not spoil the Endgame for anybody, although I felt very powerful because I saw it like 2 days before most of my peers did at a early screening. And yeah, I said to everybody that I had Thanos' glove on, and I could just snap all of their expectations in a whim. I would.
Well,
do that,
lest we
I'm
forget,
a good person.
You can have the glove and not have the power.
That's a good point. Oh, that's a good point.
Know?
So the one that really got me, the one I keep thinking about, is Cap's rising up after sort of taking a bit of a beating. He drops his shield, his shattered shield at that point, and he takes a few steps forward, this look of determination on his face that he knows, he's just going to give it his best, but he doesn't know if he's going to beat Thanos. And then suddenly in his ear, he hears an old friend say, "Cap, do you read me?" And it's Falcon. And then when he says, "Cap, on your left," and when Cap turns and sees the first of many portals open up, and Black Panther emerges, and then that follows with just all the portals opening up and everybody emerging onto the scene. I don't have words to describe the feeling that I came up in my chair. I was in a crowded screening. I stood up, had to quickly sit back down because I was blocking somebody, but I could not resist. I stood up where I was at. It was unbelievable and beautiful and powerful and wonderful, and I just loved it. So that was if I was to pick a favorite moment, if not the favorite moment, I would pick that one.
It was magical.
It was. Magical is a good word for it.
I mean, yes, I think that whole sequence from when Cap thinks has to go it alone up until the Avengers assemble is maybe one of the most stunning sequences of any of this era, maybe ever, of these comic book movies. But in terms of exaltation and unexpectedly, a moment unexpected, I just like I'm really proud of me, if I can say that.
Okay.
Because post the trailer of the black and white footage, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
Once
of
they
course.
released
Yeah.
that one of those earlier trailers, I really did not expose myself to anything past that. Like I didn't seek out anything. I didn't casually observe anything. I chose not to watch any trailers. So I really was very, the only thing that had been murmuring for some time was time travel. So I was kind of anticipating that, but I didn't know exactly what that would mean or anything like that. So other than that, I really had no clue what we were getting in for, which is such a magnificent sort of feeling for a 3-hour movie like this.
Yeah.
But so in terms of things that were unexpected, I just was not thinking about it whatsoever. And so the close-up in the big battle, Thanos has, or Thanos, as some of the actors call him, and maybe some of the movie people call him, or the characters, when he has Stormbreaker bearing down on Thor's chest, actually is beginning to slice the armor, and then you see the close-up of Mjolnir, and the split second of like, oh wow, Mjolnir's going to Thor, and then I was like, oh I started slapping the guy next to me, who actually was a buddy. Shout out Sloan. I started slapping him, and I was like, it's Cap! It's Cap! It's Cap! And then it shows Cap wielding the shield. I mean, I'm sorry, the hammer, and I was like, I felt lightning was coursing through me. I felt like I was holding the hammer with him, and we were all battling the forces of evil together. Oh my gosh.
That's so great.
And Jason made a reference to the Russo brothers specifically, and goodness gracious, they can write whatever blank check they want at this point in their career. But like, I don't mean this coyly, but you've seen it the one time so far, is that right?
Yeah, I've only seen it once. Yeah.
With my A-list, I've snuck in twice for separate hours of the film other than the initial screening. So did have the opportunity to rewatch that final hour. And the choreography, once Cap has the hammer, when he is one-on-one with Thanos.
Oh, it's
and
incredible.
It's oh my gosh. What?
Yeah.
I mean,
it's
that
unreal.
between the, because this is before Thanos has started breaking the shield.
Oh yeah,
so he's like slinging the shield and throwing the hammer, and the hammer's bouncing off the shield, and the shield's bouncing off the hammer, and he just beating the out of Thanos. Oh my god!
Yeah. Oh, I mean, yeah. It's so phenomenal. It's
and then Avengers assemble.
Yeah.
Like you can't.
Yeah.
You can't.
Oh,
like
yeah.
you could. The Lord could have taken me right there. And I don't even really believe in the rapture, but it could have happened, and I would have been like, all right, cool.
Man, Babylon B released something that said, what is it? Or like, I forget what their headline before. It was like, in strong declaration or whatever, Jesus returns like moments before the Avengers Endgame premiere. I was like, wow.
Thank you, Jesus, for not doing that. I love you.
All right, so I guess without further ado, I think that's we should say that is one more installment of What You Watchin', Read and Listening To. What You Watchin', Reading and Listening To. Do, do.
Oh, man. It's beautiful.
It is great. My son was playing with his little plush guys, and he has little plush guys of like Mario and Luigi and Waluigi. And then all of a sudden I hear him say, "Daddy, Daddy." So I looked over at him, and he holds up, and he's got a little wooden thing that we built at Lowe's of the Avengers twin jet. And so then he's holding it, and he's like, "Only Luigi can pick this up." And Mario was fighting Waluigi, and then all of a sudden, like, Mario like summoned the Quinjet over, and
that's
like
amazing,
and like held it. And he was doing this all on his own. He saw the movie just once, and it was great. It was so great. I felt so proud. It was awesome.
Oh my goch. Yeah, I took my big kids, and my oldest one, like, she's already pretty emotionally fragile. She was just pretty much from go. She was just a weepy mess. I mean, I can't blame her. I was kind of right there with her.
You're like, I know.
Dude, I know we're trying to get away from this, but my other A-list sit-in for 45 minutes was the very beginning, and it happened to be today, so it's fresh in my mind. Man, they tap a vein with that first hour. It's It's like, it's hard.
Yeah, it's really heavy.
It gets me all sad.
Yeah, it's very, very heavy. And the gravity of the gravity of everything that they're dealing with and everything. It's really an outstanding achievement. It's really an outstanding achievement.
But Silver Bullet, what are we really here for?
I was gonna say, but another outstanding achievement on a somewhat lesser level was but yeah, so we are here to talk about hashtag 19. I keep going back and forth because, like, yes, so the film is Silver Bullet, the novella is Cycle of the Werewolf. Do you mind if I hit you with a few like little trivial bits about this little piece of information, this little piece of thing?
Hit me, Riri.
Hit you. All right, I'll hit you with Thor's hammer and Cap's shield. Okay.
Don't do that.
So I really like King has, because of the popularity of his name and sort of his brand as an author, he's been given a lot of opportunity to do some sort of like publishing experimentation, things that maybe publishers would like to sort of try to market or try to do, but they can't do it with just a random author. They need to do it with something that's like a supreme pedigree that they know they'll be able to market just on the name alone. This was originally conceived as like a specialty calendar wherein the owners and the readers would get, every month they would get an illustration by legendary comic artist Bernie Wrightson, and they would have a small bit of text from, of course, Stephen King. But King himself really struggled. As we know, his books can be of just gargantuan length, and he really struggled even with the, somewhat flexible time frame to keep the chapters brief enough for printing logistics. So ultimately that calendar project was abandoned, and they instead pivoted into a special novella that was published in an edition that has all of Bernie Wrightson's planned illustrations and the full complete text, totaling somewhere in the neighborhood of like 110 pages, 110, 115 pages, called Cycle of the Werewolf. And I've always loved that story because I thought, like, yeah, that would be really cool to have a calendar. I don't know that anybody would wait, through to December to read the entire material, but I thought that was a pretty cool concept, a cool idea. They then
I love the notion that maybe they just didn't think of that. Like I love just pondering that it's like, no, it's a great idea. And then they go through the whole cost of printing and shipping and all that. And then it's like, are people really going to wait month to month to read these chapters?
Right.
Anyway,
right.
sorry. This is where
no,
goes
of course.
when it's tired.
No, of course. So I have a couple of other pieces of just random trivia that I'll try to get through. King wrote the screenplay. It's funny. I neglected to mention in our conversation a couple of weeks ago about Pet Sematary that King also wrote the screenplay for the 89 adaptation as well. So he's done that a few times. He adapted this screenplay particularly as well. And I think it's one of the strongest adaptations of his work. I'll get to some of that when we get into likes, dislikes. Also, the director of this film, Daniel Attias, I think is how you say his name. He was actually he's got a ton of television credits, but this is his only feature film credit. I'm not quite sure why he never went on to direct another feature. Maybe just that's not how things played out. But originally, this was going to be directed by Don Coscarelli. Does that name mean anything to you? Offhand?
No.
So he's most popular and known for the Phantasm franchise, but we've covered him before in that he directed Bubba Hotep.
Oh.
So, and this was going to be directed by him, but it was also produced by Dino De Laurentiis, and there were presumably a lot of complications and creative differences between Dino De Laurentiis and some of the other figures pushing this project forward, most specifically Don Coscarelli and Stephen King himself. One of the main sort of differences that they had was De Laurentiis wanted a very bombastic, ostentatious, and impressive werewolf. Stephen King, Don Coscarelli, and the creature designer Carlo Rambaldi wanted something a bit more subtle. They wanted to sort of operate in you only see parts of him, and it's sort of done with more shadows, and they wanted something that was a bit more like actual animalistic. And so there was all of these complications and confrontations about it. Don Coscarelli eventually walked from the project, and De Laurentiis was presumably given like an ultimatum, like, okay, shelve this project, don't do this project, or let us do it the way we want to do it. And Laurentiis relented. Say Laurentiis relented several times real fast. But he basically did that, and then Daniel Attias came on to complete the project. My last little bit of trivia is Tarker's Mill is a town that's referenced in several other pieces of King material because it's a fictional town King created. It borders towns like Castle Rock, Derry, and most particularly Chester's Mill from Under the Dome. But thus far, this is the only, even though it's mentioned several times, this is the only story in which King has actually set the story in Tarker's Mill. So anyway.
It's funny you say that because I think it's in this. Is there like a highway sign for Derry?
Yes. Yeah. I think it's visible in this. Yeah, there's a sign for Derry because it's like, I don't have a map in front of me, which there's been one published like in some of his books where he actually has like, Stephen King's Maine. You could probably Google Stephen King's Maine. But yeah, so Tarker's Mills is next to, it's funny because I can't remember at the moment if it's Mill or Mills. I've heard it both ways, but Tarker's Mill and Chester's Mill
make up Revelation and Revelations.
Yeah, but yeah. But like Tarker's Mill and Chester's Mill make up like the twin mills. That's what they're colloquially called in King's verse. But anyway, yeah. But this is the only story that's actually set in Tarker's Mill. I thought that was interesting.
Now, I just due to life and time did not read the calendar, but are there any super dramatic differences?
Surprisingly, there's more deaths in the novella. But another pivot, and again, King adapted this, but another really big pivot, one that I actually love, and I'm fond of the novella, but it makes me more fond of the film. So the character of Uncle Red, who is actually Uncle Al in the book, but his uncle plays a much more prominent role in I shouldn't even say prominent, because the character of Uncle Red in the book does all the same things that the character of Uncle Red does in the film, but he is not as involved in the conversation or the dialogue. He doesn't know why he's doing the things he's doing. Like, he does give Marty the fireworks. He does work out the silver bullet. He does all of those same things, but Marty then just goes off and does the things on his own. I like that in the film, they make Uncle Red an actual active part of what's taking place, because I kind of like that he has a little mini redemptive arc, given what we know about like his past and the complications and everything like that. I like that he's along for the ride. The other major difference is that though he has a sister, the sister does not narrate it and is not as the whole sister-brother relationship and dynamic is not really present in the book. So those and so basically I could sum it up by saying some of the emotional beats that the film really leans into are not totally present in the book. The book is much more compartmentalized. It's also spread out more. Marty himself is not, I mean, he does the same things he does, but it's not his story. It's only, like, he only pops in like, the relevant chapters that are important to him when something happens to drive the story forward. So, yeah, King chose to make the movie a much more sort of full-bodied arc for Marty and his family, and I really like that. I think the film is stronger for it. So, this was your first time seeing it, right? You've never seen it at all?
No, I had not read it. I mean, I had heard the title Cycle of the Werewolf in terms of King's work, but I had not read it, and I had definitely not seen this film. So you'll get a kick out of this. So I didn't watch a trailer. I didn't read anything. I had zero knowledge, and I came to love this once I understood what it was working with here. I had no idea that the wheelchair aspect of it was the silver bullet.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And so when you don't know that, and you just see Marty in the thing, and then he and Brady and Anne Shirley with an E have their encounter. Come on, let's shout out Megan Follows.
Oh,
my girl.
Absolutely. Yeah.
They have their kind of altercation at the park or wherever it is,
yeah,
the fair
with the
or
snake.
something. Yeah. Well, then the family station wagon, again, this is going to sound like a real jerky commentary, but I had no idea what the plot was, so I didn't know. So the station wagon is pulling the trailer with the giant wheelchair. And I wrote, I love that this family just drags this giant wheelchair around behind this giant station wagon as a rule. Like, then she pulls out the collapsible one when they get home. But they hitch a whole trailer to the wagon to carry the motorized one. Oh, and I was like, Corey Haim is like, this is like a low-key X-Men origin story, and he's Professor Charles Francis Xavier in his motorized wheelchair.
Wow.
But no, it just tripped me out because I'm judging this family because I'm like, what are y'all doing driving around this giant wheelchair when they literally pull up to the house and she goes and gets the much more compact collapsible version and gets it out.
Right.
Like, what is wrong with these people?
Why don't they just leave it at home? Like, you don't need it. You don't need to. It's not like you're going to misplace it. Like,
look at all the work you've done just for the thing you've got at home in an easier fashion. But I had no idea that the silver bullet in question was the actual.
Oh,
so once that happened, I was like, oh, I really dig this.
that was what pivoted for you for the movie. It's like, before that, this is so dumb. After that, oh, this is great.
No, I wasn't thinking it was dumb. It was just funny. Like, I like to comment on what initially are perceived as dumb actions of characters. And then
Sure,
it's like,
of course.
Look at that. They were actually being intentional. That's a good little family.
Well, I got a text from you that delighted me a lot. Just it was basically just expressing like, hey, I liked this a lot more than I expected to like that. This was a really fun flick. I feel like what's interesting, when this film came out, it was received with pretty mixed to negative reviews, and it was just a few years after like American Werewolf in London, The Howling. So werewolf films had been prominent, and Silver Bullet didn't do as well because like its marketing didn't fully like announce the whole conceit of the film. Its marketing had like a full moon and like a foggy sort of forested area. And so regardless of all of that, it didn't do very well. But in recent years, I wouldn't say it's had like this full bore critical reassessment, but it has got a lot of fans. There's a lot of people who are, like myself, very fond and affectionate for this film because it had been sort of dumped onto cable where people were like, okay, yeah, let's just we want to run a Stephen King film, run Silver Bullet, and then with prominent repeat viewings. And I feel like this is, maybe you would agree, I don't know, but I feel like it's one of his more accessible pieces. I mean, it's not like King is inaccessible in terms of his film adaptations, but I feel like this one particularly, it's one that I would recommend to people as something that's not too horrific. It's not, terribly graphic. It's got a couple of moments you have to sort of be watching for, and it's got such a big heart at its center, at the center of its story, that I do think this is a really sort of palatable and accessible, again, approach to some of his work.
Yeah, I think accessible is a good word because I'm processing in the moment. I don't want to relitigate sort of Pet Sematary, but
yeah,
the 89 version of Pet Sematary, one of the things I struggle with is it feels like is transliteration the word I'm looking for?
Translation, maybe?
No.
A literal translation?
Yeah, I'd love how like aphorism, transliterate, I just like multisyllabic words, and I just sort of
like multisyllabic.
See if they work in context. But no, like, in other words, I don't mean translation because a lot of things can be that. I mean, like, it's such a direct copy and paste from the prose.
Sure, Pet Sematary, you mean? Yeah.
Right. Pet Sematary. That, and I'm trying to pivot towards applauding Silver Bullet here. Well, I think that's one reason Pet Sematary, the 89 film, struggles to me is at the heart of Pet Sematary, the story is an assessment of death, an assessment of grief based in this a very simple story, which is your child dies tragically and you have the means to bring them back to life, but it's horrific. Like, that's a very simple nugget that I think works great in the prose, but then when you transliterate it over to the film, it kind of gets buried. Whereas with Silver Bullet, the core of it is kids discover something menacing that's threatening their safety, and they recruit an unlikely adult to their cause. Like, that's effectively it. And so it never feels overburdened with narrative. It's not too much. It's very direct. It's the character dynamics are really strong. I can't stand Gary Busey, but he was great.
He's great in this, isn't he? I was like,
he really is.
I don't know that I would be that sort of bombastic with my disaffection for him, but he's never done much for me. But I love him in this movie. I think he's so perfect for this character. He's great. He's absolutely great.
I mean, I can't go without saying that John Locke is up in here.
Oh my gosh, yeah, John Locke is the sheriff. Oh man, it's great. I love seeing Terry O'Quinn in these early 80s roles. They're so great. One of these days, this is a side tangent, but one of these days we should cover The Stepfather just so you can see Terry O'Quinn really have like a leading role in a horror film.
Is that similar
great.
era?
Yeah. It's 80.
Okay.
I want to say it's like 84, 85, somewhere around that same time frame. I think I'd have to look it up.
Speaking of actors whose names I don't know and didn't look up because I didn't think I'd bring it up, but I thought the actor playing Brady's dad was great.
Oh, isn't he wonderful? Yeah. He's fantastic, and he's so watchable when he's on the screen. Like every single time. Now, admittedly, the film frames him to have big moments. And that helps, but even so, just his presence in the room when he first barges into the bar and is like, has anybody...
He's got an almost comic aesthetic to him. Like he's got a very distinct kind of visual style, or not style as in he's stylish, as in just like he's got a real distinct look. He stands out on film that can almost be a detriment, but specifically I remember thinking that during the scene when he discovers Brady's body, the choice to just have it on him, and he delivers. I mean, he really sells that.
And then that after effect when, like, I love that we're in kind of likes, dislikes. I love that scene before the mob goes out. I love it. I love they're all plotting something.
Is that Private Justice?
the private justice moment where he comes in and the sheriff kind of tries to quell everything, and what finally tips the balance is Brady's dad, and that whole scene is so well written and it's well performed. You've got some really strong character actors populating this entire cast, and that probably can't be undersold. I don't really feel like, with maybe one or two exceptions, there's any overt weak links here. There's some people who are a bit over the top and some things that are played a bit extreme, I think sometimes intentionally for, exaggeration. But for the most part, you've got, just workaday actors here showing up, delivering very compelling readings of the text, and it really all meshes together very well.
It's funny. You can feel free to push back on this as it's just kind of coming to me. I don't think it's a weak link per se, but not knowing the story, I didn't see it coming. But I don't care for the pastor's performance.
Interesting. Okay, yeah.
Well, I mean, don't care is strong. I just mean, like, because I wasn't thinking about who is the real culprit, which is kind of dumb watching a werewolf movie, because that's effectively all they are. But I wasn't thinking about him, and so once it's him, it's like, oh yeah. He totally played it that way, It's like,
right,
he's definitely
right.
got a little bit of an oddball kind of creep factor going on.
Sure. Although, well, no, we'll get to that one.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
So one thing that I thought was kind of spoiler alert, as if you needed one with us, but so the reveal. So in the novella, Marty takes the eye out with the fireworks, same way he does here. But in the novella, that happens in July, and he tells people about it, but nobody believes him. Of course, nobody believes him. And then it's Halloween when he finds it out, because when he finds it out, he's going trick-or-treating door to door, and the Reverend opens the door with an eye patch. And in the novella, his parents don't go to that Reverend's church, so it has literally been months since he's seen this Reverend about town, and the Reverend doesn't recognize him because he's under a Yoda mask at the time. So then what Marty does is Marty then starts writing letters to the Reverend telling him that he knows the secret, that he knows the truth of his sort of werewolfness, and then he writes him several sort of like taunting letters. Meanwhile, he gets his uncle to craft the silver bullet. His uncle doesn't know like what the whole deal is. And so then Marty finally sends the Reverend a letter in December signing his name, saying, come silence me if you want to silence me. And then the Reverend, as the werewolf, shows up. Marty shoots him with a silver bullet, and that's how the whole thing is revealed. So again, just very different tonally and everything.
Is Marty in a wheelchair in the book?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He's handicapped.
But the Reverend doesn't. I mean, are there several young boys in wheelchairs in this? That's
a fair point, but no, he doesn't put it together. No, he doesn't put it together.
Wow.
But yeah, no, that is interesting.
Pastors today.
Well, because in the novella, right, they just don't care. They're just not paying attention.
They werewolves. They don't even notice their parishioners.
But the novella, the main family is Catholic. They go to a completely different church, and so anyway. But I thought that was kind of interesting. More on my likes dislikes list. I love the whole tone of the film. I love like the moon is ominous in the opening shot, but then this really bright musical score beats in, like this really sort of melodic, pastoral kind of musical score comes in. But then I love how this whole film kind of balances that ominous with the sentiment, and I think it does that more than many other of King's film adaptations in a way that I really appreciate. I think it's really strong because King's material are usually character-driven, not plot-driven. And the film adaptations tend to lean in on plot. They may have some strong characters here and there, but they tend to lean in on plot. And this is one that I feel is almost, there is a plot, but I feel like it's almost as much character-driven as it is plot-driven, focusing specifically on Marty and Janie. And I think that is a strength of the film. One other thing that I'll mention, then I'll pivot to you in case you have any more. I mentioned earlier that I absolutely love the dynamic between Janie and Marty. They feel like real siblings. I love everything that they do with that. I like Janie's line in her voiceover narration where she says, Tarker's Mill is a town where people cared about each other as much as they cared about themselves. I just thought that was a lovely little notation about just this place and what it means. And and then the last thing that I'll mention is I really emphasizing again, I love Uncle Red's character and how, he's made some complicated choices, but I don't know. I just love when sort of the outsider, the easily dismissed outsider is brought in on the kids who know what's going on. I love stories like that. And this is really strong for that area.
You may have mentioned this and I just missed it, but does the prose work feature an omniscient narrator, or not omniscient, but like the movie does with her as an adult?
No, in Marty's chapters we're kind of told it's like a third person omniscient. It's a disembodied character who just knows all of these different things.
I do think that's one of I agree with you that it gives some good sort of script nuggets, but I don't know that that's really a necessity, because in fact, when I did watch it, it ends kind of oddly. Like the voiceover narration, the way it ends, it's like, and it turns out I do love you, Marty, or something like that. And it's like, it's this weird kind of like past tense kind of phrasing of like you expect to have like, Marty passed away from complications due to whatever. It's just an odd kind of like way it's written. So I don't really know that that's a necessary kind of component of it. But again, I really enjoyed it, so I'm not knocking it overly.
No, and I agree with you, but it's worth noting, like, I think that's part of what this, because essentially you could make a case, this is not a story about a werewolf like menacing a town. You could make a case that structurally this is a story about this brother and sister and their dynamic.
I totally agree with that.
Set against the backdrop of this, freaky werewolf invading the town. But I think I don't know. I think that's part of what really draws me to the film and keeps me coming back to it with so much affection is that at its heart, it's this sibling story, and I think that's why it ends on the note that it does. It doesn't end with like just, oh, we've revealed it and now that's over and done with. It ends with this note of her specifically saying, I couldn't always, sort of understand my love for you. She doesn't say it that clunkily, but you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I think I find that rather lovely for lack of a better word.
And having the narration, and again, I'm not knocking the narration writ large, but it lands a little funny in the actual text, but having the narration gives the total film a more kind of wistful tonality to it that I kind of appreciate. In terms of other likes, dislikes, I've got a bunch of like dumbass notes like I take occasionally, like quoting Austin Powers when the guy's head gets chopped off at the front. And, he'll never get ahead in life.
Wow.
Let's see. Now a non-comedic note here. I love, this is a real hyper-specific, in Ian's favorite word for me, a very granular moment. There's a really great shot when Marty is out on the dock shooting the fireworks. There's this really effective shot of the firework embers hitting the surface of the water that then reflect.
Oh, yeah.
That's a really great shot. I really like that a lot.
Oh, I totally agree with that. There's a couple of shots that I'll bring up again that are in sort of more, I'm pivoting them into scares moments, but there are some really well constructed, just singular shots and singular scenes in this movie. I think that are more impressive than they probably got credit for at the time, or even probably get credit for now. It's really, really effective.
Do you have any more lingering likes, dislikes, or you want to talk about some scares real quick?
Before we talk into scares, I just got to mention that dweeby drunk dad watching wrestling, and when somebody gets hurt, he's like,
Say it! It's on my notes! I wasn't going to say it because I was like, oh, Reed's used to me taking the lowest common denominator here, but I'll just skip over it.
He's watching wrestling, and he was just like, oh, that hurts my parts.
I love this moment that this moment happened, because I'm staring at that note. I've been staring at it for a while, wondering, is there going to be an opportunity to talk about this? Everybody knows Nathan loves to go for the innuendo jokes and talk about hurting people's parts and stuff like that for watching wrestling. Like, you know what? I'm a little discombobulated at the moment. I'll just leave that note by. And then you're like, wait. Before we leave likes, I'm just going to talk about the wrestling scene. I was like, that is perfect. That is such a great reading Nathan moment.
Oh, it's so great. It's so great. But yes, there are some, and it's funny too. I think, you know, I do think objectively, we're pivoting into scares now. I think objectively, like American Werewolf in London, no question, possibly even The Howling are maybe objectively better films, like just in terms of sheer technical mechanics. I think this might be my favorite werewolf movie. I think it might be. Like watching it again, I love it.
Yeah.
I love it so much.
I would not, because we did The Howling and American Werewolf, right? Are those
those are the two. Those are and The Wolfman, but yeah.
Oh well, right, but that's more
Right.
just like that, and set up against the rest of these. That one may as well just be called Hairy Guy. But I don't really care for The Howling. I do like the things American Werewolf has on its mind, but I don't know that I would personally. Maybe with a rewatch. Okay. Yeah. I'll phrase it this way: only one viewing of each of those. This one easily stands above. In terms of just affection, just general, like, I like this movie. I would be open to sitting down again and watching it with somebody.
Sure.
But yeah, in terms of scares, one, I actually thought it was actually Hurt My Parts guy. It's a really effective death scene.
Oh yeah, where he creeps into the greenhouse and then gets pulled through the floor. Oh yeah. Oh,
but impaled on his way down or something.
Yeah. Oh man, it's pretty gnarly. Yeah, it's great. It's
gnarly.
Really great.
That's a good word for it.
Yeah, it is.
I wrote down that the Pretna girl's murder is pretty brutal, but that was the very start of the movie, so I was like, wow, that's.
Yeah, it is. It's pretty gruesome. And it's kind of twisted too that he justifies killing her because he was trying to save her.
Yeah.
There's some jacked up theology, but again, we are talking about a reverend who was a werewolf. So I mean, he's got some twisted notes.
You know, yeah. Like I want to build a case that you could have orthodox and sound theology and still be a pastor who turns into a werewolf. Like those are not those two things don't have to go furry hand in furry hand. Whatever your affliction might be, and we all have them. It's a metaphor, right?
Exactly.
So you could be the werewolf pastor, which, I feel like we're stumbling into some greatness right now. To the typewriter.
I'm gonna put that note down.
The werewolf pastor. He could still have some sound theology. This guy just does not.
That is true. Big on my scares list. I put it on my scares list, but I mean, it could fall in a few different places. Is the dad that we sung the praises of a few minutes ago barges in and says, has anybody seen my son Brady? Cut to John Locke, the sheriff, walking, holding the bloody kite, and quoting the rosary. And I'm just like, oh man, that is so effective. And here's one of the things I appreciate about movies like this is last time we saw that kid, nothing. He's just flying the kite. He's just
knew. I even wrote it down. I was like, Brady's gone. Yeah.
Oh, that's funny.
He's gone.
But yeah, I mean, it was
you don't mess with Anne Shirley, brother. You get got.
That's true. You do get got. And so but I just thought that whole sequence where the sheriff is just bringing the bloody kite and sitting down, and obviously all that builds up to him, him taking him to the body and everything like that. But that was just a really chilling moment.
And on that note, I did have bloody kite on my scares list. You could make a case they almost go too far with how saturated that kite is, but it's almost like they go just far enough to over it. You know what I mean? It's not just this splash of blood spurted across the kite. It is saturated. And
it's so,
and it almost enhances the effectiveness of the moment to just be like, holy cow, this is terrible.
Yeah, no question about it. I have a few on my list, but I'll just mention one more and then just see if you have anything else. I love the moment, and again, it's different from the book because in the book it's Marty who discovers it on while trick or treating. But I love Janie is going all through town looking for whoever is one-eyed, and the film takes some time with it and breathes and allows her to like meet these people. It sets up a couple of false, positives a couple of times.
Well, and there's those real fun shots too, real close-ups.
Oh, absolutely, because that's where that's true. That's her focal point. That's what she's looking at. And so then I think it's really a clever and effective scripting moment. So then, just at the time she's given up and she's like, okay, no, forget about it. It's not clearly it's just a fabrication. He's just making it up or whatever. And then she delivers the cans to the Reverend, and then they pivot down and show that the Reverend's only, he's got his eye is damaged. And I just love that moment. I thought that moment was great.
Yeah, no, it really is. And it's, again, that was one of those moments I just was not, maybe I didn't have my critic's hat on tight enough or what, but I was not thinking about who it was going to be. And so then when she rolls the grocery cart up, and in the distance he's crouched with the flowers and it's in profile, I was like, oh, okay, that's pretty cool. Yeah,
that's great. Yeah, that's great.
I mean, I've only got one left, and I'm worried it's going to steal yours.
No,
so.
Go ahead. No, that's fine. Yeah, go ahead.
But it's also one of the greatest sequences in the entire film.
No,
maybe,
it is. Yeah.
Maybe actually the greatest sequence in the entire film. Dude, holy shit, that dream sequence.
Yeah.
Like,
oh, yes. Yeah.
If you're not going to watch this movie, at that point, you don't know it's the pastor.
No, you don't know that's what's so brilliant about it. You don't know it's the Reverend. And you also don't know it's a dream, because it's immediately following the swamp hunt when like 3 or 4 of them go down to that beast. And then because you've already seen a funeral scene, you think like, oh, okay, well, this is just the next funeral scene. This town's just continuing to be oppressed. But then all of a sudden, it takes a turn. And and John Locke, the smoke monster himself, turns into a werewolf, and then the whole town does. And then they're doing the werewolf shuffle, and the werewolf lady organist is pounding on the keys. Oh my gosh.
That was great. That was a great moment. So then it's a dream. Well, then it's kind of hard to buy that it might actually be real. Although, that would have been cool too. But then the Reverend wakes up in a start, but not knowing the text, I was like, oh man, this poor guy. And in fact,
of course,
much of my initial thematic thoughts, I was like, goodness gracious, this poor fella, he's just saddled with this evil in his town. Like,
oh my gosh, yeah, that's pretty interesting. That's pretty great. I love that sequence so much. That is probably this is my favorite werewolf movie. And yes, the transformation sequence in American Werewolf in London is brilliant. I'm not going to take anything away from that, but I think that church dream sequence is my favorite like werewolf moment in a movie.
Oh yeah,
it is great. It is amazing. And if nothing else, I mean, see this movie. Like, let me skip to my end. Like, I'm going to recommend this movie. Everybody watch this movie. But even if you're just not down for it or whatever, like YouTube, church dream sequence in Silver Bullet. It is so great. It's really, really impressive. It's great and wonderful. Yeah, I love it. Well, I have something by way of theme that I feel pretty passionate about. I don't know if you had anything specific that you wanted to bring up beforehand, or if you want to let me set the stage and then see how yours plays in. What you feeling, Nathan Rouse?
I don't know. I mean, I think there is some interesting stuff. I don't know if this ever happens to you with the material we cover, where it's like, the germ of thematic idea is not necessarily the primary goal of the overall piece, but it just kind of speaks out to you. That was a little bit like this one. One, I did love the line. I mean, before it's the Reverend, but I love his line, "The time of the beast always passes."
Oh yeah, I know. The full line is, and this is my theme, so we can just go there.
Oh, okay.
The full line is, "The face of the beast always becomes known, and the time of the beast always passes." And I have some thoughts on that. But yes, that's what the Reverend says when Brady has died. And he says, the only comfort I can offer you is the face of the beast always becomes known and the time of the beast always passes. And I have thoughts on that. But yeah.
Let me throw a thought at you before all of your thoughts come pouring out like dancing werewolves in a church setting. Because another primary sort of thematic idea, and this will always unsettle me a little bit is this notion of redemptive violence.
Sure.
Manifest in the film as this private justice idea. And I don't know, I was just really mulling this notion of what happens when we lean into and pursue wickedness, even to rout it out. You know, and it's too cliche to say, you know, become the monster to defeat the monster. I don't even mean that, but this is like super on the nose, but we are barely a week out from, just over a week out from these terrible bombings in Sri Lanka.
Right. Yes.
And I don't mean to dampen the mood, except I don't know if you saw this. So, you know, Islamic extremists bomb these Christian church settings on Easter. It's really awful and terrible. People die. And in the wake of it, I saw headlines about Sri Lankan Muslims being beaten by vengeful Christians. Yeah. And then I watched this movie and I was like, Lord Jesus, help us. You know, like,
yeah.
What we will embrace in the wake of our own loss and tragedy, however grand and violent or minor and, you know, close to home or whatever. But like, I don't know, it just really, those scenes of them ignoring the sheriff really kind of have this unsettled quality to it.
Yeah, of course.
Anyway,
Yeah.
so that's kind of my primary takeaways.
I think there's a way. So something that struck me about specifically that line: "The time of the beast always passes, and the face of the beast always becomes known." I'm gonna sort of unpack some of my thoughts in brief, and then I'm gonna try to deftly meld what you've observed about the fallacy of redemptive violence in the midst of all of it. One of the things that struck me about that, because I have seen the film a couple of times before, I did not specifically hone in on that line. Again, when you're preparing for a Fear of God conversation, you kind of pick up on certain thematic things that you might not have picked up on before. But so I heard that line knowing the Reverend is the werewolf. And so it struck me pretty heavily that, oh, he's saying this. The face of the beast always becomes known, and the time of the beast always passes. And he is saying it knowing he's in full knowledge that he's the beast. And what struck me is, you know, he's speaking this truth out, and there's this notion about truth is no respecter of persons. And so if there is a statement that is true of spirituality, of the rhythm of life, of the truth of the ultimate end of humanity and all of these other kinds of things, it is objectively true no matter who is saying it. And so this is where I'm trying to formulate something that was pretty abstract when it struck me in the film, but there's this notion of there are people. I mean, this could be said that Reverend Lowe is a literal wolf in sheep's clothing, like literally. he's
Wow.
hiding that he's a wolf, and is the pastor of this flock. But what struck me is what he is saying about the beast and the numbered days of the beast is really objectively true. And this is I'll spit out the phrase rather than try to build towards a conclusion for it. So he is prophesying his own demise. He is speaking out the truth that will eventually undo him, because it is objectively true. And it really struck me how people who would want to distort the truth, who would want to hide behind an illusion of truth, or maybe adopt a false narrative for something, they hide behind it, and then they begin to try to tout sort of self-righteousness, or they try to present themselves as righteous figures when really they have wolves hiding all in their secret person. And what just struck me so much about this is the power of that statement, even when it is spoken by the beast himself. Like even when the monster or the beast or the wicked one would say, hey, this will pass, it is still objectively true. And I find tremendous power in that. Like, again, just the fact that he said that is, by definition to the text, it's ironic, but I also find it tremendously powerful to reflect on that. Like, you could look around and say, when we see things that are happening in the world, that you mentioned Sri Lanka, and we see things happening in the world, and then we would hear people, some of whom we may claim to be proprietors of that same sort of violence-provoking rhetoric. You talked earlier about the idea behind private justice and people sort of, or redemptive violence, the myth of redemptive violence. There are people, hopefully I'm being clear here, there are people who would say things about, like, oh, well, the time of the beast needs to end. The time of the beast needs to come to the end. Or they would speak out these evils when they themselves are perpetrating similar evils. Do you understand at least the concept of what I'm talking about? Yeah. And this is what struck me, is like the power of that kind of thing is like, oh, well, it ultimately doesn't matter who's saying it. It is still objectively true. Like, it is a truth that evil, wickedness, that those days are numbered. And I just found that immensely powerful in this film. And I feel like some of it is bolstered by the heart behind it, because who ultimately brings him down? It's this, sort of deadbeat uncle and this, somewhat tenacious but still relatively frail sister and a crippled boy. Like, they're the one, like these weak and impaired and flawed individuals are the ones who ultimately undo this evil, not the horde of armed to the teeth, ready to fight wicked men. Not that they're wicked, I shouldn't have said that, but just, like these people who are emboldened by this private justice
most
idea.
Physically positioned to achieve their goal.
Exactly. They get slaughtered, 3 or 4 of them when they go. And then it is ultimately in the hands...
That is pretty funny when the Reverend Werewolf plays baseball with that guy's bat in the fog. I was like, come on, y'all.
So yeah, I mean, it's just... I mean, we could unpack it a little bit more if we want to, and I definitely want to hear your thoughts. But that's really my theme. It's just like I like... Coming out of this movie, I was just really struck with, like, wow, yes, it is true that the face of the beast will always become known, and that the time of the beast will always pass. And that is true even when the beast itself declares it. Even when, in an effort to hide behind the illusions that he has created and upheld, he declares his own demise and his own ultimate undoing. And I find that powerful.
Do you think, and if this goes literally nowhere, you can feel free to cut this whole segment, but I'm not at all ignoring your question here. I'm just letting my brain go where it's going to go based on what you're talking about. And
sure,
something that did strike me in the film, once the reveal is in play, is, King historically has a very suspicious eye towards organized religion.
Yeah, he does.
And I don't know. I just, that once it's really, once the truth of the narrative sort of is exposed, you're like, oh, a kind of a cynical reading of it could be that too, or maybe not maybe that's an honest reading of it. I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud of just it is hard not to watch something like this and have it, for a person like me and my sensibilities of my state of mind and heart, not to kind of let those cynical aspects be fed by, a story like this. Anyway, I don't know. Just
you mentioned earlier, and I do think it's completely valid. He's as much as said it, that King has a severe distrust of, like, organized religion, which is ironic because he was, I think, raised Methodist, and there's even an early picture of him, like, delivering a sermon in a Methodist church. Like, he's expressed something. Obviously, I'm a Christian, and so sometimes the language surrounding people's expressions of faith would, strike me in a variety of differing ways. But I am fond of the way that King phrased this when he talked about faith or expressions of God. He basically said, he's like, yeah, the people who are hardcore atheists and do not believe there's anything are dismissing beauty and romantic love and the power of art and sunsets, and like there's a whole bunch you kind of have to dismiss in order to really buy into it all being chaos. He said at the same time, I'm really skeptical, and of course I'm paraphrasing his quote. He said, I'm really skeptical of people who think they've got it all figured out and they know the entire formula from beginning to end. And so I definitely don't think it's an improper reading of any of his works. Basically, my conclusion in response to what you're saying is, no, I think he's very distrusting of religion, but I think he's very affirming of a sincerely held faith or belief.
Sure.
And I think that is a pretty constant through line in his books, even in the times where people who are, we talked about The Mist last week, who are generally decent. There are still occasions where it's just like, no, it does not go well for them. But I think in general, you can see the rhythm of King's work that he is definitely framed to. I think he either described it or his fans have appropriated that he's constantly interested in the push and pull between the chaotic and the purposeful, and that all of the players of humanity are kind of constantly pulled in between those two extremes of like something that's purely chaotic and something that's deeply purposeful and intentional. And again, I find that really compelling. He and I might not see eye to eye on every facet of organized religion. I think he and I would definitely agree on its flaws, shortcomings, and problems. But there are still ways in which I believe in its power and its effectiveness. And then there are ways in which I myself am very distrustful of the kind of ways we will formulate and compartmentalize our little worlds and call it faith. But again, this I think is a story that is an echo of his distrust of religion, but I definitely don't find in this film, I think it has too bright of a heart to be like an indictment of religion.
Yeah, and I almost feel bad, taking us into that for the moment, but it's something that had been on my mind. And
sure,
I do think it's interesting setting this Time of the Beast Always Passes line. I think I'm not going to say this is a negative towards the movie, but the Reverend feels so, before you definitively know he's the antagonist, but even once it's revealed, before he gets crazy, he feels conflicted. He you know what I mean? Like,
oh, he's torn. Yeah.
Time of the Beast Always Passes. And that's why it's almost unfortunate the dialogue he uses in the little farmhouse with
the bridge. Right.
Yeah,
right.
It's almost so kind of about killing the pregnant girl. Like,
yeah.
It's almost it's such a pivot, a hard pivot into just crazy town. But because what I love, and at least the germ of the idea, is that when he says the time of the beast always passes, he knows A, that it's him, and B, that this town is out for blood.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And so there's almost this sense of, is this a genuinely pastoral note, that is happening, of like, you could say it's not altruistically administered because he is the perpetrator, and I get that, but the time of the beast always passes. You just articulated for us the truism of that statement, or perhaps even the universality of it, the objective nature of it. And so there's a world where even if I'm not the perpetrator of a thing, but I sense violence fomenting amongst good people.
Yeah. Yeah.
That the pastoral call, that the time of the beast always passes, like it's an attempt to calm that storm, in others. I don't know. I'm just sort of riffing at this point, but
no, it does make some sense to me. And again, I think it just comes back to, it could be easy. I don't know if this is specifically what you were scratching at, but it can be really easy to be very cynical about, you can call them platitudes of those kinds of expressions. And coming out of the mouth of a person later revealed to be the beast himself, it would be easy to dismiss a line like that as cynical, ironic platitude. But again, I find a power in it that even when there are tremendous flaws, or even when there are even going beyond flaws to overt, sin, wickedness, wrongdoing in the heart of a person, that these declarations still hold power. I think that's really what I'm scratching at. These declarations still hold power, even when they are, and naturally we decide how to respond to them, and we decide how seriously to take them. But such things, the scriptures say that the word of God will not return void. Now, naturally, that in context is referring to the actual communication of God to his people, that it will accomplish what he sets it out to do. But I think there is a principle underneath it that it's like, truth has a power, and that power can be wielded in perhaps a number of different ways, but it will prove itself effective and true ultimately, regardless of who is trying to wield it, or who is trying to hide it, or who is trying to, as Shakespeare said, not the scriptures, but as Shakespeare said, the truth will out. It just has a way of bursting through the barriers, and it has a way of finding itself in the narrative, and I take great comfort in that. I take tremendous comfort in the fact of, like, yes, there is evil, wickedness, injustice, wrongdoing, but I do think there is a not superficial hope to be grasped in, like, no, but these things are true, and there is a power in that truth that will, it's like the oft-quoted, perhaps too oft-quoted King quote of, not Stephen King, Martin Luther King, where he said, the arc of history is long, but it bends towards justice. Like that also itself is a true statement that will prove itself true in ultimate reality. And I don't know, I take profound comfort in that, regardless of who it is or what flaws they have who speaks it out. So that's my feelings on Silver Bullet.
Yeah. I feel like there's places we could go, but we're out of gas. The wheelchair's out of
sputtering.
gas.
Yeah, the wheelchair is Silver Bullet's sort of coasting now, or just in cruise control. Do you want to go ahead and pivot us into the fog meter?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, so on every episode where we cover a film, we maybe even beyond that, we're going into a measurement where we rank these films by the rank of our title, Fear and God. So we're ranking it on its frights and its substance and themes, etc. I'll go first on the fear measurement. So for me, as I mentioned before, it's pretty accessible. I think there are some great suspense moments, and it's just a fun fright flick. If I were measuring it purely on the basis of its scares, I'm not going to give it higher than about a 5. But it is very accessible, and I think this is almost a case where judging it on its scares pivots negative, when actually I mean that as a very big positive. Like, it's really accessible.
That's actually higher than I was expecting from you. I think I'm going to land at a 4 on scares. It just has this almost Amblin-esque kind of, like, whimsy to it. If I don't know that I'm actually wanting that word specifically, but this, you are not really ultimately concerned for the well-being of them ultimately. It's like, okay, I'm kind of safe in the storyteller's hands here, because I'm pretty sure these characters are more or less safe, except Toll Brady.
Yeah.
But he was not safe. So, I mean, and honestly, my 4, probably about 3 of those is that dream sequence. It's fantastic.
Oh, it's so great. Yeah, it's so wonderful. Well, what would you say for the God measurement?
I think that, that line itself that has become the refrain, takeaway, and just some of the loose meditation on kind of the nature of violence and our response to our own pain. I think I'm going to go for a 5 on substance.
All right. I'm going to go just a slightly higher than you. I'm going to go for 6. And I do think that there's some things there. It's almost funny, because if we're measuring substance by the capacity of the story to unpack or explore certain themes, then I feel like, 6 is maybe a little too high. It's a little generous. But if we're going based off like character richness, it would probably be much higher for me. And so that's why I pivoted a little bit up. But hey, we still give this a solid 5 out of 10 on the fog meter. So that is that's
legit.
Yeah, no, I think it's quite legit. Listener, I already pivoted my hand earlier, but listeners already know whether or not I would recommend this film. I think everybody should see it. I think absolutely everybody should see this film, unless you are just absolutely not going to watch a scary movie ever. I think this is a really great, sweet, fun, occasionally frightening one that you can sink your teeth into, and I really like it. How about for you? Would you recommend it?
Absolutely. Not having watched the trailer, not having read anything, I literally knew nothing, clearly because of my ignorance about the wheelchair stuff, but I thoroughly enjoyed the watching of it. It was a lot of fun. It's got a lot of heart to it. The relationships are very well drawn. The character dynamics are really potently executed. Yeah, there's a lot to like in this movie.
Awesome. Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Hashtag 19. We've got two glowing endorsements for Silver Bullet. I would also recommend, if you can seek it out, Cycle of the Werewolf. I actually don't think it's available digitally. I think you have to buy the physical copy of it. But yeah, I highly recommend it. Nathan recommends it as well. So, Nathan.
Reed.
Next week, man. Next week.
Next week, what? Tell me.
I'm so excited because next week we're creeping up on you. We're going to one of the, as the tagline indicated, the most fun you'll have being scared, which I actually quite agree, at least with the sentiment, if not the actual factual nature of the statement. We're going to George Romero directed, Stephen King written Creepshow. It's our first anthology film that we've ever done on the show. I'm very, very excited. Yeah, we've never done one before, so I'm very, very excited about that. So check out Creepshow, and we will be continuing with hashtag 19 next week. Nathan, thank you so much for watching Silver Bullet and for having this conversation with me. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome, brother. Thank you for, just manufacturing me a new, faster mode of transportation, so we can get to more of these horror movies in a more timely fashion. Thank you for having me along. Guys, we will see you and 6 of your other short stories next week for Creepshow.
You're welcome, you booger.
See you guys. The fear of God is the beginning of wisdom, but it is not the end of the conversation. You can continue this conversation in a variety of ways. On Twitter, @TheFearOfGod. On Instagram, @FearOfGodPodcast. You can like or follow us on Facebook or join the Fear of God Facebook discussion group. Follow Reed on Twitter @ReedLackey and Nathan @TheNathanRouse. Email us at fearofgodpodcast@gmail.com or visit morethanonelesson.com to comment on the official episode posts. And lastly, if you listen to us through iTunes, we would greatly appreciate a rating or a review. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next week.